Okay. So can I ask, did you sit there because this was in the way? Is that why people moved? For the AC. Very good. Okay. Thank you all. Hope you had a good evening. I'm going to talk to you today about creating trustworthy digital identity. So I mentioned digital identity yesterday. We had a little conversation about some things. In fact, I'll do a pop quiz. I used the term for ADHAR, what kind of identity system it was. Does anyone remember the word I used? Began with F. We'll find you, it's no problem. It was a foundational. Yeah, sorry. There's a foundational identity system, and that's really important because what you've got is you've got sort of the internet, but you've got this identity system, which is in your case ADHAR. Yeah. And then remember, what does ADHAR do? What does it confirm?
It's your different identity features like impression, eyes.
Yeah. Yes. And what does it do?
It carries personal data also. Every individual.
Yes.
It's carry personal data.
But there's a server, right, in ADHAR. Do you remember I talked about the sort of the pigeonholes? Yeah. And it is, ADHAR is, important things are it's one-to-one, yeah? Not one-to-any. You don't search the whole database. It's not identification, it's verification. So you present your number in some form, and actually it's a tokenized version of the number, but that's not important. But what does it confirm, essentially? It's foundational in the sense that it only confirms you are who you say you are in front of me. Nothing about the rights that you have. Yeah, everything for that sits on top of that, which might be, you know, from a ministry. Yeah, because a ministry, you might go to a fair price shop. Yeah, and you go to a fair price shop. So I went to a fair price shop a couple of years ago. Yeah, you go in and there's prices for rice. Yeah. And then for certain people, that there is some rice for free, for example, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong, of anything you know, because you guys are locals, I'm not. But from what I saw when we were doing the test, some rice is free and some is subsidized, and then some is normal price, right? But what happens is, so you go to the shop and you present your card and or your QR code or whichever it is. Yeah, and there's a thumb reader. Yeah, also the same for buying a SIM, because we tried to buy a SIM as well. But you place your thumb reader. Yeah, that takes it a presentation of your thumb. Yeah, that then goes off to the server with your number, essentially. Yeah. Now, what can happen is the person in the shop can see either on the QR code the device that they've got, or on your card, they can look and think, yes, that looks like you. This is an important thing called human in the loop, yeah? But essentially, what goes back to the ADHAR server, and there's some protections in there, like some mixing, so it doesn't always know you went to the same shop because it's aggregated. But what happens is, the first thing about you getting that rice is, check, is that person the person in front of me? The biometric and the number comes back and it says yes or no. It says no. That's it. Yeah. It says yes. What it does, that's the foundational. And this is what's called the functional. Yeah. So for example, in the UK, we have a driving license. You have a driving license in here as well. That is a functional identity. It gives you the right to do something, namely drive a car. Yeah. The foundational doesn't give you any rights. It just determines who you are. Okay. So the functional might be a ministry. So what happens is You first pass the check that it's you, then the details then of the ID, yeah, go to the ministry database checker, and that will then say, have you had your benefit, or, you know, in COVID times, have you had your vaccination? Yeah, to make sure that people don't take lots of vaccinations, yeah, number of reasons. And that does a check and comes through, and when that's confirmed, then the service can be provided, okay? Yeah, so that's the system. So we talked a bit about that yesterday, and the work, as I said, is funded by, who funds the work that I do in digital identity? You remember? The Gates Foundation, yeah. It's not working again. Is there another microphone on or something? It doesn't sound like it's mine, but this isn't working. That isn't working. Anyway, just to say, because I have to acknowledge, yeah, this work is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They do a lot of development work, okay? So, just to recall, we need to create trustworthy digital identity. And that's what we've done. So, at the Alan Turing Institute, what is important to us is to write fundamental research where we can. Typically, a lot of the fundamental research I do is created in the University of Warwick, yeah. But the Alan Turing Institute is for thank you, for science and innovation, to create real huge, thank you, impact. Was it turned off? Sorry. Sorry. Okay, to create impact, and that's what we do, right? So working with the Unique Identity Authority of India, working with MOSIP, which is going to be operating in 13 different countries, is really important to me, yeah, and to the Institute. Okay, so we created a tool. So we created something called the Digital Identity. Digital Identity System. Not moving very much, right? Maybe it's the connection there. Okay. Okay, so the Digital Identity System, DIS, Trustworthiness Assessment Framework. So Trustworthiness Assessment Framework. So this is a system. For the moment, could you lower the screen as well, please? Put the cat in for that one, so you can see a little bit better this. I'll close the light. Okay, so the Digital Identity System Trustworthiness Assessment Framework, yeah, what we did is we looked at, first of all, what we did is we analysed 36 textbooks, 24 standards, and 18 guidelines and recommendations, and did a peer review of what people thought was good practice. So our whole aim was based upon the 6 pillars. So these are security, resilience, privacy, robustness, ethics, and reliability, okay? They're quite important, those 6, yeah? So along those 6 dimensions, yeah, what we did is we analysed a whole set of work to find out what is the best recommendation for a trustworthy digital identity system. And we looked, so under security, as you might expect, we categorized it under confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Let's go to privacy. Well, he said actually there was privacy in communication and privacy in processing. We then looked at ethics, and some of the key elements of ethics were transparency, explainability and fairness. We then had reliability. So recall, reliability is that it does the same thing each time. So it was repeatability and consistency. For robustness, we have maintainability, variability, and control, because that variability, remember I said, if the data is different or it operates slightly outside of what you expected, does it still handle that well? Yeah. And in resilience, we thought about recover, detect, well, protect, detect, and recover. Yeah. I'll talk more about that process, that cyber resilience, that thing about protect, detect, and recover later. So there are 6 pillars of which we created a number of mechanisms. Yeah, so the mechanisms I've just gone through: confidentiality, integrity, availability, etc. And then to metrics, because what we need to do is create a tool that people can assess systems with. So this is a tool that's available now. We are going to be working with the Philippines, with that MOSIP instantiation in the Philippines, and we are going to run an assessment against this tool. I'll tell you in a minute how we've done some testing of it already. Yeah, the idea is, sorry, that says accessors, it should say assessors. Yeah, if there are standards that they've already got, so ISO 27001, many people, especially a national organization, might have that for their digital identity system, then you can just pre-fill the metrics there. I've already got that. Yeah. You can also say, well, in my system, there is no element that you've got, right? So you might have, don't think you would, but you might have no multi-factor authentication for the system administrators, okay? So if you've got none of that, you can just close that off. So you can exclude mechanisms. And some metrics are what we call mandatory. So the whole point of this is an assessment framework. It's going to give you a score. Yeah. How private is your system? How secure, how resilient and robust. Yeah. So it's going to give you these metrics. Now, what's important about these metrics is it's just a scoring system. Yeah. It's designed to be developmental for the country in use. So we may actually work with ad hoc on this. But the thing is, it's not for us to say how much security you should have, how much privacy, how much transparency. Yeah. Because different countries have different approaches, right? So probably in this state that I'm in, yeah, if I went to the web, I probably wouldn't be able to go to a gambling site. Is that correct? Is that correct? Gambling. In this state, would it be filtered if I went to a gambling site? Sorry? There are certain sites that the state will say. What I'm trying to say is in different areas. So this is, okay, let me say something else. This is a dry state. Is that correct? Good. All of India is not dry, is it? And that's because different parts have different things, right? Different countries have different things that they want, right? So what I'm trying to say is we need to have that flexibility to say, you can build the system how you want. I won't tell you how private it should be. I won't tell you how explainable it should be, because people will make their own choices, okay? It is only an assessment tool, right? Based upon the best practice. But who decides what best practice is? Yeah? It's not for me to go and tell somebody in India or a state in India or somewhere in the Philippines or Benin, where I went to in Africa, and say, you should do this. That's not my job. That's not what I should do. So with this system, it just provides a snapshot of where it is. And people can say, I'm happy. Yeah. It's the same that I am currently doing a cybersecurity capacity maturity assessment in a country, yeah? And what we're doing is we're analysing how strong the cybersecurity is in that country. It will not be strong. I know this already because of some of the stuff we're doing, yeah? But that's not a problem. Many countries that have already had this assessment have shown that they're not at the greatest levels. They're not going to be at the, even the UK will not be at 5 for everything, right? That's okay. It helps you determine where you are, find out if you're happy, and if you're not happy, to improve. And maybe you've got much more of one element than you really needed, so you can cut back and prioritize somewhere else. So that's the whole idea of this tool, okay? However, when we do things, because we're assessing, we need to have some mandatory metrics, okay? So if we think about security, yeah, and we're going to say, how secure is your digital identity system? Yeah. Then imagine you do lots of good practice. You've got ISO 27001 and things like that, which is about information management, yeah, information security management. So if you've got all that good process and that's all fine. But imagine that you didn't have a password for your main admin to get into the system. No password, no username. Yeah, it's admin with no password. That would be pretty bad security. Do you all agree? Now, what we can't do is have loads of tests, you know, like you do with a test, like you're going to do an exam here, right? You can't have all those things and say, oh, you got 99%, you're pretty secure, because this is the really important thing, right? So within our system, what we've done is we've defined mandatory metrics. Yeah, if you do not satisfy that metric to the degree we think is important, then the assessment of that will you'll have an upper cap, and that upper cap could be 0, right? And it could be that the metric puts an upper cap on the mechanism, but that mechanism could actually also be mandatory. So put a cap on the pillar. Okay. That's an important thing when you want to do these assessments. So here's a sample metric, right? It's in the pillar privacy. The mechanism is privacy risk mitigation plans. So do you have a plan for mitigating risk? So the metric is, have you had a third-party privacy risk assessment conducted? So you can see why this is good practice, right? So privacy assessments are common, but some of the guidance say that you should have a third party. Yeah, it came from these relevant standards. So this one doesn't specifically state that, but it's about a general thing about having it. But ISO 27001 provides guidance for conducting risk assessment. Yeah, so this is in the operational phase. So one thing to say is we have metrics for the operational phase, but also for the design phase, because sometimes you're just designing a system and want to work out if it's trustworthy. It's not mandatory, so it doesn't cap anything. Yeah. It's a binary metric, yes or no. Yeah. And there's a description of it, yeah, and then details of the standards, okay? So we run it as a web version. We'll be going to the Philippines, as I said, soon with it, and we've already had some feedback. So within the system, you've got an administrator, yeah? So this is your localizer. So this is the administrator of the back end, the tool that we do. Yeah, and it's able to do comparisons. So what you can do is we have this way of snapshotting the system to say, what was the system that was tested, right? It was this version of the system running at this time, yeah? And all that is captured in the tool. And then you can have some external, so here's the assessment tool. You can retrieve some of the assessments, and you need a login to do that. So that means that maybe there's somebody who does an assessment, might be a third party, but other people in the organization, maybe in the ministry, can sign up and have a look at the system. Okay, and that's all within the country. Here is what we do, software update management. Okay, so here's the example of an assessment. There was assessment 3 and assessment 4. You can search it, etc. So I mentioned briefly about CISA, and there are 18 CIS controls. They're similar to the 10 steps that I went through with NCSC. So CISA is very well regarded, but there are 18 controls. So it says here, what you're doing is you're pre-selecting, there's a tick that says, I am compliant. I already do. So wherever the stuff that you need to do for the CISA, you can just tick it here, yeah, and it will pre-populate the answer for you. That doesn't mean you can't go in and override, yeah, but it gives a little bit of ease to people to say that this was pre-populated. The good thing with that is we do maintain a record that you said that you are CIS compliant, CIS control compliant. Yeah. As I mentioned, we have operation and design. So there are certain things that only apply in design and certain things that apply in operation. But what you get, and it might be easier to see on this screen here since you're all over here, you get one of these spider web kind of diagrams, yeah? So what you do, it's got 0 to 5, yeah? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, across the 6 different axes that I mentioned: security, privacy, ethics, reliability, robustness, and resilience. Yeah? And at the moment here, the score is 0, of course, because we've not done anything yet. So here you can see, if you can't read it, because at the back it says pillar. The code is security, it's the pillar. The number of mechanisms within that security is 15, and you can see the scores. They would be populated. I'll show you some scores for a test system soon. You can then, after the pillar that you've selected, in this case security, you can look at the mechanisms, yeah, and the code is S for security and VM for vulnerability management, yeah. Under that, you've got here vulnerability management, which score you get at design or at operation. There are certain things are more important than others, right? So there is a weighting applied to each element. So the default is 1, but it might be more significantly weighted. Okay. Within the mechanism of vulnerability management, there are 7 different metrics. Yeah. And what we've got is you've got this box where you can say exclude it. We don't want to do vulnerability management. Yeah. So that if you don't do that, your score, your average, you see, differs if you've excluded or not. And here is a description saying what we mean by vulnerability management. So here are things. So one that's important here is that what we do is we make it easy by, if the system is running, yeah, we take log data. So existing log data that you've got and feed it into this tool. So you can do that automatically through an API, or you can do it manually by hand. But what it says is, if you're doing vulnerability management, yeah, it's asking, what is your mean time to detect? and that is a percentage, and it's in the operational, it comes from your system log, and you put in the percentage value there. Yeah? What is your mean time to resolve? What is your, do you have patching management in place? You can see it's a Boolean rather than percentage. And what is your residual vulnerability? That is percentage as well. Okay. I don't know what's causing that. And when you've run a report, you can get the PDF. So we've had somebody who worked in the software engineering industry for 20 years who created this tool for us. The one thing is you can look at different assessments. So this is, first assessment was on TA1, just test assessment 1. The second was on TA2, test assessment 2. And you can compare them. And I will show you 2 comparisons. This is null at the minute, but you can compare them across the design and the operation. There's some color coding that we apply, yeah, which is a deep pink. When it's applied to a metric, it means such metric is mandatory and forces a gap. When applied to a mechanism or a pillar, it means that one or more mandatory metrics are not satisfied. Tomato red is when applied to a metric, a mechanism, and a pillar, it indicates the corresponding score is 33% or less. So this is a sort of danger area. Chiffon is reasonable, and light green is doing well. So here we go. We created at the Alan Turing Institute a test bed, yeah, a test ID system based upon the modular open source identity platform, yeah, MOSIP. And what we did is we said, okay, on our setup, how well does the system do? And what you can see in the design, yeah, this wasn't supposed to be an exemplar by any means, but in the design, it did not so well on privacy, okay? It did well on reliability, not so well on ethics or robustness, and well on resilience and security. So you can see that whoever set up the system was really concentrating much more on security, resilience, and reliability than privacy and ethics, for example. However, in the operation, yeah, that transpired that actually it did poorly everywhere apart from in the ethics. Here's the privacy pillar itself. So you can see how well it did. Scored 0 on this pillar, 0 on this pillar. This is privacy impact assessments. So one of the questions would have been, do you conduct privacy impact assessments? It may have been third party or not, but clearly we hadn't conducted one, so scored a 0 in both design and operation. This is the security pillar, and you can see where the access controls were really strong here. Yeah, so here is where, you know, single sign-on. So really strong here, but really weak in a couple of areas. Yeah. Ethics pillar, couple of areas completely missed out. Reliability, resilience, and robustness. Again, robustness very weak there. So what have we done since this time? We worked with MOSIP and we shared with them our learnings from this, not the scores. The scores are not important. And one thing that is really important, I should state, is those scores that you got are not about the MOSIP system. They're about how it's used, right? So it's about how it's configured. It's not up to MOSIP to say whether you should use multi-factor authentication or whether you should follow, remember that NCSC guidance, yeah, on passwords? It's not up to MOSIP to say I should do that. It gives you the flexibility. So it's all about how we set up the system, which we did deliberately to test it a little. But we shared it, and more, not the assessment score, but more about the commentary, and that helped them identify unknown security gaps. Yeah, it helped them get a better shared responsibility model of when they're working with systems integrators and people and governments, and it gave a deeper insight into better security. So we're working closely with them. Okay, any questions on the Digital Identity Systems Trustworthiness Assessment Framework? Sorry, I need to come closer because I can't find.
You have shown that diagram.
Yeah.
Ethic pillar.
Yeah.
So that is a red curve.
Yeah.
You are satisfied that below 30%.
Well, in the version that we did, it was below 33% because we know how we set it up. And would I be satisfied with that system? I probably wouldn't. So what I would do is, if this was my real system, I would then say, oh, that's really bad, I need to improve it. For example, I would say, so if the government was looking, or a system integrator, they would say, we haven't realised about privacy impact assessments. And they're important because you could see that method was zero. It's easy to do. It'll take you a couple of hours, maybe a little bit long. It will not take too long to do a privacy impact assessment. Yeah. In fact, we have designed a pro forma to help you write a privacy impact assessment for digital identity systems. We've got some kinds of guidance on what you might do for that, what consideration. So it should be easy to do, and that can improve the privacy in that case. Sorry, not ethics. But there are other things. The same thing applies in the ethics pillar as well. But that's the whole point, so that people can decide, are we happy? Yeah, and don't forget, sometimes the government will send out for procurement, right? And they won't actually know about some of this stuff, so it can help them. But governments, because you can turn off the operation, you could get design documents from a number of people before you invest a lot of money in a digital identity system. And then from that design document, say, well, this solution that they're offering is not as good as this one. So before you even put it into practice, okay? So I'm going to talk a little about risk assessment and threat modeling now. So this work that we're presenting here, I have to give credit to the World Bank. The World Bank are part of the United Nations, and what they do is they fund countries. They've got it's not quite an organization, but an area called Identity for Development. Yeah, so World Bank supports, they provide loans to countries, yeah, to invest for development so they can get stronger, and then when countries get increased economic activity, yeah, they pay the loan back, yeah. It's some of the larger economies give the initial fund, yeah. It's not the same as the International Monetary Fund, which is a separate organization nearby in Washington, but it is there to help provide access to payments for countries, country level, especially those that are developing, so that they can get some investment, get some loan, yeah, to help them get better social and economic outcomes, okay? So the World Bank worked with us at an event called ID for Africa. So even though it is Identity for Africa, we do have people like myself go, people from the Philippines will go, etc., because it's good to share knowledge. But principally, it's people from the African continent. So they have many, many different governments attending, for example, and local companies. And we ran a one-day workshop attended by about 150 people on cybersecurity of identity systems. And what we wanted to do is to show people in the room, we just gave a little case study on one threat modeling approach. We chose Stride and Dread, yeah, because has anyone heard of Stride or Dread? No? Okay, so this is important. If you are going to develop a system or have implemented a system, it is important to understand the threats to that system. Yeah, so there are different techniques. We use things called attack trees. We use things like a composite modeling approach. We use something called Octave, Pasta, and Trike. There's many different types. So you've got to choose the right one. It depends whether it's Stride is quite a simple one to apply and is perhaps the most common. It was developed by a guy at Microsoft called Adam Shostack more than 20 years ago. But it provides a way that you can look at what kind of harms can come to your system, what kind of attacks. So if you haven't heard of it, I'm glad I'm telling you about it. So Stride basically considers a system and says along these 6 axes, what are the things that can go wrong? So the first one is spoofing and impersonation. Yeah. So can you spoof, pretend to be somebody else? Yeah. Tampering, similar to the insecurity, the I of CIA, integrity. How can things be tampered? You'll remember that I talked about non-repudiation yesterday. That was in it was in a couple of things, but certainly in the NIST document. And I said, non-repudiation, along with authentication, are the 2 extra bits with the CIA that form the 5 pillars of information assurance. Yeah. So repudiation, so non-repudiation means that you can't deny that you did something. Okay. So how, I'm going to ask you hopefully a simple question. How in real life do we ensure non-repudiation? How do we make sure that, you know, we have got some, because if you want accountability, you want people not to be able to deny that they did something. Yeah, I'm saying in real life, but you're exactly right. First thing is a signature, isn't it? That's what we tend to do. We get somebody's signature. But in digital world, we use digital signatures, right? And that is exactly what gives you non-repudiation, right? Because someone says, well, only you had the key. So how is that signed that way? So repudiation is the opposite of non-repudiation, is deniability. Information disclosure, so this is a bit more about the sort of privacy and confidentiality. Availability, denial of service. And the other thing is elevation of privilege. Remember, I drew that sort of onion skin model yesterday, defense in depth. Elevation of privilege is something where people can actually have more rights to access than they should do. So here we go for spoofing. The definition is impersonating something or someone. With the whole purpose, because you're impersonating somebody, you're getting access to information or systems that somebody else had. So the idea is, you know, Somanath has got some access to a system. I pretend to be in, so I might steal his credentials or something like that. Yeah. The impact from it is you could really lose data, and there's also identity theft because I might be able to steal his identity. Yeah. So an example is email phishing using a trusted sender's address. Yeah. So I might borrow Somanath's laptop, just go and send something, and people will think that it was Somanath. Yeah. Okay. And there is an analogy in the real world. Tampering is the unauthorized modification of data or systems, and what it's for is to alter data or create fraud or sabotage. Yeah. So if you've got some critical data, we can manipulate it. The impact is integrity, largely. An example would be changing some transaction values. Yeah. Another example, of course, would be putting zeros everywhere. You change them to zeros, so deletions. Yeah. Repudiation is that you can deny that an action was performed. If you can deny it, you don't have accountability anymore. And remember, with trustworthiness, we said that's one of the important things to have. It erodes trust, and you might have a user deny sending a contentious email. Information disclosure is exposing private or sensitive information. It compromises privacy and confidentiality and leads to identity theft. And it could be, an example could be accidental public posting private customer data. And this is interesting here because this may not be from an attacker, it could be accidental. So it's denial of service. I think we all know what that means. But the whole purpose is to disrupt the service availability. Yeah. Elevation of privilege, as I just said. You get unauthorized access to higher levels. Yeah, so you can do these in combination, of course. It undermines system security, can lead to breaches of data protection. So we're now going to consider this stride model. So if you want to do a digital identity system evaluation, your objective is to identify or mitigate security threats. Yeah. So what we're going to do is apply this stride threat model. That's what you might do. And your outcome would be improved security and reduce risk. Now, when you do this, you have to work with different people. So this is so many companies will carry out a threat assessment for you. Yeah. In fact, we sort of did one yesterday a little bit informal using the reference architecture. Do you remember on the biometrics where I showed you where the attack points are? That's one way to do it. And what you can do is you can use stride or dread on that. Because what you do is you say, well, what point could happen? Yeah. So, for example, on the one yesterday, we talked quite a bit about tampering, didn't we? You could inject something in, yeah? There were also other bits where you could have spoofing. You could impersonate a person, yeah? But also spoofing is about spoofing data. One thing that's important about spoofing and tampering, yeah, is that it's not necessary that you compromise the integrity, the confidentiality of the data, right? Many people think that confidentiality is broken if you tamper, but it could be that something's encrypted, yeah, and I replace it with either something corrupted or something that I know and encrypt or don't encrypt and put it in its place. It's just about doing that. So it is possible, you know, that you don't know the information yourself. So they can be independent or they can be linked. Yeah. But with any such system, you need to bring in the developers, the security team, and some users. Yeah. And this is the process. So you consider, you know, first of all, identify the assets in the systems, so user identity, authentication tokens, etc. Consider a spoofing threat, which is unauthorized access through fake user credentials. Yeah. Look at what else could happen. Modification of identity data by attackers. You could leak in personal information. And the whole point is to create a mitigation strategy, in this case, multi-factor authentication or encryption. Okay, so within these systems, we didn't conduct this in my team, but what was identified as the most major risks in the identity system being considered was spoofing, tampering, and data leaks, or information disclosure. So out of the three, denial of service was not seen for this system as a major risk. And that's because they probably had lots of resilience in the system, yeah. But spoofing, tampering, and information disclosure was. So what the action items were was to implement multi-factor authentication. You can see how if you do that, you cut spoofing down, right? Because you can't impersonate someone as easily if it's multi-factor. If you've done that, then it's a bit more difficult to tamper the information, because one of the routes to tampering information is to get in with somebody who's got access, right? And if you enhance encryption, it means that you'll prevent the information disclosure. Okay? Recommendations on future monitoring, regular security and updates, audits and updates. And if you do this, what you will end up with is a safer system and enhanced customer trust. So the review strategy for this was continuous assessment. Yeah.
So please go to the previous slide.
Yeah, I will.
How can you create a spoofing using a multi-factor authentication mechanism? Can you elaborate?
How do you overcome spoofing? Because one of the ways to spoof, spoofing is impersonation as well, right? So what you've got is, sorry, give me a second. I'm just going to go to that. Right, impersonating someone, this case is, right? So if I want to impersonate you, and this is quite a funny story actually, because in about 2002, I can tell you this now because it doesn't work anymore. In 2002, I was asked, could you break into my bank, sir? And I had to be honest. I said, yes, I could break into your bank account. And I said, oh, what? How? I said, it was really easy, right? And what you do is I would use a spoofing attack, right? So the way to do it, I can tell you because it won't work now, but I'd already tested students the week before about passwords. And what I said is, I was talking about passwords and complexity, things that NCSE did a number of years later. But what I said is, I asked about passwords and I said, would you tell me your email password? And someone told me in the room right there, yeah? Now we're a lot better, it's 20 odd years ago, right? But they told me the password, and the reason they gave me the password is because of that trust thing, right? Their value at risk was really low. Because at that time, not lots of people were using email, yeah? You just did it for a bit of university stuff, and they went, and they literally said to me, they told me the password, I went, change your password right now, yeah? Don't do that. It was a rubbish password as well, yeah? And I said, change your password right now and don't do it. But their value at risk was low at the time. And what I explained to them, actually, there was a bit more risk because I could send out emails from them, which were maybe at that time just became illegal. Things that were racist, for example. If you spread racial hatred in the UK, that is illegal. So if you encourage others to attack somebody for their race or their sexual orientation, that's an illegal act, right? And I said, I could do that from your email account. Oh, didn't realize that. I said, but the next day I gave them another example, which I said, I could break into their account at that stage because all I had to do is contact the bank and say, oh, I've forgotten my password. Yeah. And what happened is they would say, okay, we'll email you a new one. At that stage, they used to just email in plain text your password. Yeah. So it was a really simple thing. So that was really easy. Now that we've got multi-factor authentication, yeah, it's no longer typically with the passwords, and we talked about biometrics. It's something you have, something you know, right? So a password is something that you know, yeah. But now multi-factor authentication means it's not just something you know anymore, it's something you have. Multi-factor is typically a biometric, so you have a biometric. It's not you know it, you don't know your iris pattern. It's something you have. A token, a long time ago there was these RSA IDs, yeah? Now it's all in your phone, right? But they say, okay, do you know your password? Yes, you do. But have you got your phone? If that's the case, then even if I sit behind Somanath, watch him type in his password, when he leaves, I think I'll get into his account. I can't spoof him now because I don't have bespoke where they'll send a one-time pass. Okay? Good question. Right. Okay. And then what you can do is the other technique is called dread. Or I should say some limitations. It's complexity in large systems. There's a lot of complexity, so it's hard to spot stride. It's qualitative, not really quantitative, because you can't put numbers against it, so it's hard to compare. Threats move and evolve, and it can be resource intensive. But it is the most popularly used tool. Dread is actually something that says, okay, well, if you're breached, and this is what's important so you can do risk assessment, it says, if you're breached, what are you going to have? What's going to happen? So how severe is the damage? Yeah? Is it reproducible? Can somebody, if they've done it, do it again and come back and get your system again? How much effort is required to exploit it? How many different users have been affected? Is it just one or two? Yeah, or is it everybody? And how easy is it to discover? Okay, so this gives you a way to say if something is really severe, yeah, but affects one person, yeah, then that's going to be some kind of moderate kind of thing. It's bad for one person, but maybe you say I can live with that, yeah. Something that gives small damage, but to many people, is sort of equal in a sense, right? So you can just say, well, what you care about is when these combine, when it's something that's really damaging, it happens to lots of people, yeah? It's hard to discover, yeah? And it's really easy to exploit multiple times, then you've got big troubles. Okay, so I'm looking at time. So this was on the system that was considered, this evaluation, yeah? The damage, yeah, of a digital identity system being compromised is very high, right? You can imagine, yeah? For the particular threat, yeah, the number of affected, so this clearly, what was being considered was not where it was just one account being leaked. This is something system-wide, right? Because you're getting high damage with a large number of affected users, high exploitability, reasonably easy to discover. It'll be reasonably easy to discover because there's some link, but lots of users have noticed it and it's got high damage, right? So that means that you're probably going to discover it reasonably well, but the reproducibility was also high. Okay, so dread again is a useful tool, but there is subjectivity because when you quantify, somebody might say it 2 and somebody says it 3. Right? How do you make sure that you're exact in there? It's static, it only happens at a particular time, and it rather oversimplifies. Yeah? So, what I've done just now is covered some threat model methodologies for you, given an overview of stride and given an overview of dread. So I recommend if you're building some systems, if you're ever going to become a security analyst, yeah, so these are used in Microsoft today, stride and dread, yeah, then they are useful tools for you to do assessments. So one can do, you know, we do formal security analyses of systems, and they're a little bit mathematical, and you might prove something mathematically. But at the end of the day, as I said, until you deploy that, you can have something that's, and there aren't many things that are provably secure, but you can have something that's provably secure, but if it's not deployed in the right way, your system is not secure and therefore not trustworthy. Okay, it is 11 o'clock. think, right? But my clock's in British time still. It's 11 o'clock, I think. Okay, any questions or comments?
What's the role of NFC key in access control? So NFC key, whenever I open my system, it shows multiple options to access my laptop, like password protected, and they don't open NFC key. Very it's
near field communication key, yeah.
How it's working? I never understand how it's working. How it's
okay, so an NFC key is similar to many things. It's just something that you've got, yeah. What an NFC key is useful for is that if you've lost a device, yeah, if you've got NFC, it just gives that added protection. I think they're a great idea because if you think about it with a mobile phone now, yeah, it should be secure, but if someone compromises that, they've got access to everything. And the second authentication, most of it, yeah, is all on there. So the things that you know are already embedded in the phone, right? Yeah, because they're all in secure areas of your phone, and if you know the password, you can get in, right? So there's a little bit of a problem that the second factor of authentication is not what we call out-of-bound. I don't know if you know, but in the UK, when I got my first credit card, I get my credit card sent, and then separately, I get I used to have to go to the bank access. Separately, I get a different, I get a pass-PIN code. So I'd have to go to the bank first to get the card. That was one thing, and then through the mail system, I get. If you've got the same screen, like the phone, you know, like I said, with the phone, it'll be a code comes to your phone, doesn't it? Right? It says enter the code that we just in, but you've got access to that already because you've access to the phone. If you have NFC, what it says is keep this NFC tag next to you, yeah. And then what we know is these two things, and it means that if the chain is broken, yeah. So don't forget the way that near-field communication works. So you send signal. This has got a key in it, just like in your card or your phone or anything. And what happens is using some near-field communication, when it gets close, it activates and sends out a beacon. So it will send something saying, yeah, I'm close. The good thing about it means that if you lose something, you're going to lose both of this. The bad thing is if you lose one of the things, then you've got to have a backup mechanism. And whatever the backup mechanism is, the resilient system that you've lost this NFC token, if there's a problem with that, the attacker's just going to go down that easy. Remember when I said I was going to attack that banking system with the email compromise? There's no way I was going to try and get into the front door. I was just going to pretend that I'd lost it because I knew there was an easy route to compromise. Yeah. Okay, it's 5 past. Let's reconvene in 15 minutes. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we could put the other presentation up ready for this afternoon. Thank you.